Welcome to the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. Here's your host, Brien Hanley.
Hey, what's going on, everybody? This is your man, Big B, Brien Hanley. Welcome to Big 12 Insiders Game Day weekend. We have our man, Cody, Nagel, and Alec, Busse, both joining us to talk some stuff going on in the Big 12 Conference, pick some games, just have some fun today. So today we're talking, basically we're realigning our conference pick from what we thought was going to happen at the beginning of the year to what is actually going on now in the Big 12. It's absolutely crazy. Just upside down. Every week there is a twist and a turn. Also discussing what in the heck is going on at Oklahoma State. I can't explain it. I literally cannot explain it. And then last but not least, who is the best running back in the Big 12? A lot of good running backs in the Big 12. We'll get into that. As always, we'll also pick the spotlight game of the week and then talk about some of the locks of the week and then upsets of the week. So we'll get into all of that. Before we do, remember to always like, follow, subscribe, continue to hit the notification bell and leave those comments. We appreciate it. But let's start off here. So, Alec, I'm going to start with you, my man. The Big 12 has just gone absolutely, it's upside down. I think a lot of us kind of thought it would be, obviously it's going to be competitive. And I thought we would think it would be topsy-turvy, but I didn't think that a lot of us, for instance, nobody thought Arizona State would be, except for you, Alec. I'll give you credit. You did say that. I'll give you credit.
Hello.
But I don't think there's anybody, even BYU fans didn't think they'd be 5-0 at this point in the season. I don't think there's anybody who thought that at all. I don't think anybody thought Oklahoma State would be 0-3 in the conference right now. But this is the Big 12, man. It's just is what it is.
Yeah, I think the conference is everything that we kind of thought it would be, but maybe to an extreme of what we thought it would be. And it's kind of fascinating to see it up close and to be able to observe it the way we've been able to observe it. I would be really interested, and I don't have the time to do this homework, but it feels like every week that, betting underdogs are winning games in the Big 12 that maybe isn't occurring in other conferences. Cody, you work on our national team and you do all sorts of fun projects. Maybe you can dive into this. How many betting underdogs beat betting favorites last year in the Big 12? And if you wanted to exclude Texas and Oklahoma, I guess you could, since they're no longer in the conference. So just move them to the side. I think it would just be really fascinating to kind of see that up close and personal. Last week in week 6, Houston was a 16.5 point betting underdog. They won outright. Texas Tech was a 6-point underdog. They won outright. Arizona State was a 2.5 point favorite over KU. They won outright. Baylor lost, and West Virginia was a 3-point underdog at Oklahoma State, and they won outright. So three teams in the Big 12 last week actually won outright as betting underdogs. So I think that's just a really good synopsis of where the league kind of is. And now you're at the point where every single betting line in the conference is less than a touchdown. So it's gotten to the point where it's you're trying to pick games in the Big 12, and it's similar to trying to pick NFL games where no one actually has any clue of who's going to win each week.
Yeah, and also how many of those last week were underdogs that won on the road? There were all of them that you mentioned, right?
Yeah, Houston won on the road, Tech won on the road, and West Virginia also
West Virginia too.
All three of them were road underdogs, and they won outright.
Yes.
Yeah, that's the other thing that's so surprising is before, the parity in the Big 12 was, okay, it's difficult to win on the road. The home teams would usually win. They'd usually get the upsets. That doesn't seem to be there, at least this season. So I think that's created some more of that, chaos that we've seen with, Texas Tech being up there and, even Colorado going into UCF and winning that one was surprising. So, yeah, I think that was the thing that surprised me is just how much more success teams are having on the road.
Yeah, if you go back to week 5, BYU was a 2.5 point underdog at Baylor. They won outright. TCU was a 2-point underdog at KU. TCU won outright. Cincinnati lost at Texas Tech, but I think you could argue they outplayed Texas Tech in that game. Colorado was a 2-touchdown underdog at UCF. The Buffs won outright. Arizona was a 12.5-point underdog at Utah, and they won outright. So, yeah, teams are getting upset in this conference. Home favorites are getting upset in this conference. And quite frankly, I just think it's very clear that like no team is safe.
Yeah, it's wild what's going on right now. It's just like I said, I didn't think you knew it was going to be competitive. You knew there were going to be some things that, always a surprise team that happens in every league every year, but nobody thought that this many road teams were going to win, especially being the only one that I disagreed with was the I don't know how Baylor was favored over BYU. That didn't make sense to me at all. But Vegas knows a heck of a lot more about this stuff than I do. But the other ones, it's just like, what is going on? It's like you mentioned, Alec, and then some of them were 2 touchdown underdogs and winning by 2 touchdowns, just going on the road and whipping people. I mean, it's just crazy. So, but to reset that or this whole conversation, I guess, on who the conference picks, who right now, Cody, would you say has an inside track? And obviously there's going to be 2 teams there. Who are your 2 teams that have the inside track to be able to make it to Arlington right now?
Yeah, so right before we started, I went through like the remaining schedule and tried to just quickly pick all the games. And I actually have Texas Tech up there as one of them. I think just based on who they have left, they play Baylor at TCU. I think Iowa State is the one that they lose. And then you've got Colorado, Oklahoma State, that's on the road, which, I mean, at that point, who knows, maybe Oklahoma State's finally decided to make some changes with coaches and stuff like that, and maybe they're even more of a mess. But then they also play West Virginia. I just think their schedule is probably the easiest of those top contenders. So I've got them as one of them going to Arlington. And then I ended up with like a 4-way tie for that second spot with BYU, Iowa State, Kansas State, and Utah. And I think I have no idea what the tiebreaker scenarios would be. I didn't have time to do that, but I would say that Utah is probably the one I feel most comfortable with as long as Cam Rising comes back. If Cam Rising does not come back, I think I'd lean with Kansas State to go there too.
I agree. I would probably have Utah there as long as Cam Rising comes back. If you're looking at betting odds at DraftKings right now, Iowa State is plus 300, K-State is plus 425, and Utah is plus 450. Those are clearly the top 3 teams in the eyes of the DraftKings Sportsbook, because then there's a big drop-off then to West Virginia at plus 750. After that, I guess if I was asking you guys the question, if you don't mind me taking over hosting duties here for a quick second here, B, how confident would you be betting on the Big 12 championship game featuring at least 2 of those 3 teams at the top of the conference in terms of betting odds?
Yeah, I would feel very confident.
Yeah,
to bet your house on it.
Well, the thing about it is with Utah, I'm at the point where I don't believe that Cam Rising's coming back until I see him on the field. I don't believe it because first of all, they're lying to us about how serious the injury is. It's been a month and he's not playing, and it's a hand injury. Something's going on. He had surgery. Something has happened.
Well, wasn't it first reported that it was like a laceration on his finger?
Yes.
Yeah,
correct.
but he just cut it. Yeah.
Band-Aid on that. He could have come back and played in the game. I go, so whatever they're saying, it's just way more serious than that, which that sucks, but that's just is what it is. And we've seen what they look like when he's not on the field. They're not any good. They're a totally different football team. Maybe the bye week has helped them. We'll see. Kansas State can't play on the road right now. This is a big game coming up with Colorado, and we'll get into that later, but they haven't looked good on the road. So until I see them actually be good on the road, I don't trust that.
I think I would say
Tech's the team. They got the road. They got the inside track.
They do, but
how do we really trust their defense moving forward?
I trust Iowa State's defense. I do, because I think they have one of the best defensive coaches in the conference. The reason that I would be apprehensive to buy Iowa State stock is because I don't think they've beaten anyone overly impressive.
Correct.
Iowa has probably disappointed this season if you look at what they've accomplished. I'm not saying Iowa's bad. I still think Iowa's a team that'll be in a position to win probably between 7 and 9 games this year. In my opinion of Iowa is no different because they lost 35-7 to Ohio State on Saturday. I thought that they were going to lose 35-7 or worse to Ohio State on Saturday. The results of that game doesn't change my opinion on it at all. What changes my opinion on it is They, again, can't throw the ball at all. Their defense is giving up big plays in ways that it hasn't before, and it's made their defense more susceptible to allowing points, which puts more pressure on an improved offense, especially on the ground. But, yeah, I don't – like, Iowa State has played a really cakewalk Big 12 schedule at this point. Like, Houston's not good. Baylor's not good. You could argue that those are the two worst teams in the conference at this point. So it's hard to go all the way in on Iowa State, and that's giving them all the due respect that I can, because they're 5-0 for the first time since 1980. They're ranked number 11 in the country, and they've got an opportunity to reach 6-0 for the first time since before World War II on Saturday at West Virginia. Like, I think they're the league favorite right now. They have the betting odds to be the league favorite right now. All that said, like, their schedule is hard for me to go all the way in, but if they win at West Virginia on Saturday, my confidence level of them starting 10-0 before their last two games at West Virginia and at Iowa State goes through the roof. Because if they can beat West Virginia, they should handle business against UCF at Jack Trice. They should go on the road and easily handle KU. They should probably beat Texas Tech at Jack Trice. They should handle business against Cincinnati at Jack Trice as well. Like, the schedule just continues to open up for them if they can go on the road and beat West Virginia this weekend, Cody.
Yeah, I agree. I actually had them losing at West Virginia when I was doing the quick picks or whatever. But yeah, I think, it's the schedule that makes it difficult to fully buy into Iowa State, in my opinion, just because of what they have left. Texas Tech might be a toss-up in my opinion. The Utah, K-State games are kind of toss-ups, but if they go on the road this weekend and beat West Virginia, I'm like you. I'd buy in on the Cyclones.
Yeah, here's the thing. This weekend in the conference is going to tell us a lot. And clearly there's still a lot more football to be played, but you're going to kind of see, so there's going to be some defining games. And I've mentioned it on some other podcasts that we've done on the Big 12 Insiders, has said this is kind of a legitimacy games for a lot of teams in this conference this week. And we'll get into that. But, yeah, I just think a lot this week is going to separate, some pretenders from the contenders. I know that's a cliche that a lot of people like to use, but Alec, I think you're right. It's like we give Iowa State a lot of credit, but we have to be honest in who they've played. Are they really that good? So, and that's the thing.
I don't think to me, I don't think Iowa State losing at West Virginia would knock them down to a pretender tier for me. I would circle other games. Yeah, I would circle other games for that. Like, if K-State loses at Colorado, then I think K-State probably falls out of the Big 12 favorite tier. What happens in Arizona BYU? I still don't think people are fully bought in on how good BYU is, despite being 5-0. And Arizona's probably been the most difficult team in the conference to get a grasp of how good they really are, because they've been super inconsistent throughout the first half of the season. So yeah, I think that those are other games that are more indicative of, how good are these teams if they win or they lose. Like, if Colorado wins, you're probably moving them into like legitimate Big 12 favorite type conversations, which I think would be quite entertaining to speak selfishly.
Well, with Iowa State, was thinking more if West Virginia wins the game, then West Virginia moves into that conversation, because
I agree.
People right now look at West Virginia as, well, yeah, they've won a couple of games, but who did they actually beat? Oklahoma State can't get out of their own way. Well, Kansas can't get out of their own way, and Oklahoma State may just actually stink. So who have they beat? And they blew a game against Pitt that they're probably kicking themselves right now, thinking, man, what would our season look like if we just hold on to an 11-point lead with 5 minutes to go? So, or with 3 minutes to go, actually. So that's what I'm thinking more of in that game. But I think there's a lot of make or break games. You're right about the Colorado game. You're right about the Arizona BYU game. There's a lot going on that kind of separates teams, that will separate teams. But you're right. Certain teams, like if Kansas State loses, it's like, okay, how good are they? But I think it makes Colorado say, yeah, Colorado's actually pretty good. So we'll move on. What is going on, Cody, at Oklahoma State? I can't call what is going on. And it keeps getting worse. You got whipped against Utah. They had a backup quarterback, and they just came in and just ran it down their throat. Okay. Then you go to Kansas State. You start off pretty good, and then you get manhandled for the last 3 quarters. Then West Virginia comes to town, and it's a bloodbath. What is going on in Stillwater right now?
Well, I think the better question would be what's not wrong with Oklahoma State. I think that might be easier to answer, but yeah, I have no idea either. I think there's just so much. I had somebody text me from Oklahoma. I think it was during the second half when it was like out of reach or whatever last week, and all they said was this team stinks. Like there's nothing really good to say about them right now. I think the big issues, and it kind of has led up to this, is their coordinators just aren't good. Like Casey Dunn's been there since I think 2020. They haven't had an offense that's finished in the top 4 or something as far as like Big 12 in scoring. Before he took over, I think they were inside the top 3 or something each of the last like 3 or 4 years or something like that before he took over. And then like the defensive coordinator hire and Brian Nardo comes over from a D2 school in Pennsylvania, had no power conference experience, had some time at Ohio that it didn't really end well there for him. The way he got let go, it wasn't really mutual or anything like that. But the reason Gundy brought him in was because he ran a similar system to what Iowa State runs, which has been so successful. And I know Oklahoma State made some interviews or whatever with guys that were connected to that system. I'm blanking on the coordinator's name. What is it, Alec, at Iowa State?
John Haycock.
Yeah. They had interviewed some guys that were connected to him, and eventually just landed on Nardo. And it's just not working. I mean, he's in his second year now. They're towards the bottom in most of the defensive statistics. They had Jim Knowles. That was the thing. Like they had the defensive coordinator that they wanted, and that was arguably the best in the country. But the university just wasn't willing to pay him what he deserved, and now he's got the best defense in the country, in my opinion, at the other OSU in Ohio.
Wait, what about Oregon State?
Okay. The other. Yeah, the other one, the one that's in a power conference still. Anyways, but another thing too is that the QB development has been bad. They took a chance on getting Alan Bowman as to kind of fill that gap year between Spencer Sanders and Garrett Rangel and Zane Flores, who the freshman they've got now, or redshirt freshman, and Bowman just hasn't been consistent enough. But also the younger quarterbacks just haven't developed enough to kind of take that spot from him. So you're kind of stuck with just putting Bowman back out there because he's the most experienced one. And I mean, I feel like I could go on and on and on about all the things that are wrong, but I think it starts with the coaching staff right now, and that the fact that they just don't have good coordinators to fix the big issues.
I think what's wrong with them in terms of like on the field personnel is they can't run the ball and they can't stop the run. And sometimes football can be really simple. And if you can't do those 2 things, you're probably not going to be a very good football team. West Virginia ran for, I think, 390 yards against them over the weekend. Is that correct, Cody?
389.
389. Yeah. Oh, damn, I was 1 yard off. I tried to just pull that. I tried to just pull it. I knew I wrote it somewhere. Man, I would have been really impressed with myself if I had actually pulled that accurately. When you give up 390 rushing yards, and I respect West Virginia's rushing offense, it's very good. Like Jaheim White is a star in the making. Garrett Green is probably one of the better playmakers in the conference with his legs, and CJ Donaldson is the most productive of the 3 on the ground. You don't have a chance at that point. Like,
no,
you have no chance to win when you're giving up almost 400 rushing yards. And they've done it multiple times now where they've given up over 200 or 300 rushing yards because K-State ran all over them too. And Ollie Gordon can't run the ball because his offensive line isn't opening up holes, which is probably the biggest surprise of anything on the roster because their offensive line is as experienced as you'll find in college football history. And maybe some of the blame falls on Ollie Gordon for just not being good enough to run through the holes that are given to him. And then beyond that, now that you're behind in every game because your defense is getting ran through, blank through a tin horn, as Nick Saban once said. You're being forced to have Alan Bowman throw the ball all over the field, and he can't do that. He's not talented enough to lead a team back to a win with his arm. So yeah, like the coaching clearly is not where it needs to be. Cody highlighted a lot of that with the coordinators, and I think the on-field personnel at the line of scrimmage hasn't played very well, and it's hurt the skill position talent across the outside of the field as well.
Yeah, that's kind of what the stuff that I'm seeing. They're just not physical at the point of attack. And if you're not going to be physical up front, then everything else, it just doesn't matter. I mean, you're right, Alec. Football is simple, or it can be simple. And if you're not good up front, it doesn't matter. I mean, we saw that at Colorado last year. Colorado had a ton of skill position players that were just fine, but they were awful up front, and that was what they had to fix. So I don't know what's going on at Oklahoma State. It's bad. I had people tell me all year that they were going to win the conference. They were going to be so good because of what they had coming back up front. Alec, you're right. And it is fact, the most experienced offensive line coming back in the history of college football. That's insane if you think about it. And for them not to even be able to run it after what they could do last year, I don't get it. I think teams are just saying, hey, man, we're not going to let you run the football. You're going to have to throw it. And they've got NFL wide receivers, too. It's not like they don't. They got some guys that can play on the outside, but the quarterback play is not up to snuff. I think, Cody, you're right. I think the play calling and maybe some of the schemes are just pretty simplified, and teams can figure that out. It just and a multitude of things. And now where they sit, now you're going to run into a problem of our guys going to quit. What's going to happen. And I think that's probably going to set in. It probably set in about halftime of the West Virginia game. It's like, okay, this is it. We're finished. And it's unfortunate, but that's just what happens, man. Sometimes it's what happens.
Well, one of the things that made them so good in 2021 when they went to the Fiesta Bowl and the Big 12 title game, when they were literally inches short of winning that and probably getting into the college football playoff, was the defense was so good, and it was forcing a ton of 3-and-outs. And then it would get the ball to the offense, who, I mean, it wasn't great, but it would do enough to, to give the defense a break, to get some rest and get back out there and force another 3-and-out or something like that. This year, it's like the complete opposite. I think I was looking at it yesterday, as far as like 3-and-out percentage on offense. They're one of the worst in the Power Five. I think they're like Houston, Florida State, Oklahoma, and Purdue are the only ones ahead of them as far as like 3-and-out percentage. And then you go to the defensive side, and they're the worst as far as opponent 3-and-out percentage in the Power Five or Power Four, and 129th nationally. So like there's complementary football, and then there's like the complete opposite of that, where you're hurting yourself on both sides. And I think that's kind of a big problem too, is, the defense isn't getting a rest because the offense goes 3-and-out, and then, vice versa. Then, the defense is on the field for a lot, and then they're tired. And yeah, there's no recipe for success on this team right now. And everything's just snowballing and making it worse. And, I was looking yesterday, or the other day, I don't know if Oklahoma State's going to make a bowl game. I don't see 3 guaranteed wins on their schedule, and they've got some of those bottom tier teams that they should beat, but I don't have much confidence that they're going to do that. So yeah, if they don't make a bowl game, I think there's going to be some pretty big changes at Stillwater.
How many teams in the Big 12 are you comfortable saying are worse than Oklahoma State? It's a very short list for me.
Kansas, Houston. Yeah,
I don't know if I think KU is actually.
I don't even know if Kansas.
I think Houston's the only team.
So I don't know.
I think Houston's the only team that I think is worse than them.
I mean, I don't know. Yeah, that's a great question. It's just they are just not a good football team right now. It's bad on both sides. They just can't figure it out. It's unfortunate, but we'll see moving forward.
Because at least when KU was losing games, I guess they still are because they've lost 5 in a row. They're losing because they turned it over, not because they're just getting physically dominated. at the line
They
of
just can't finish
scrimmage.
games. Like they should
and
win
Yeah.
games.
because they had the
Yeah,
lead.
like they
all
should have beat
5
Illinois.
before.
They should have beat West Virginia.
Yeah.
Like they outplayed those two teams. And the game against Arizona State was quite honestly like two evenly matched teams. They both played pretty
Just
well.
back and forth.
Arizona State ran the ball really, really well. But like if they stop turning the ball over, I actually think KU has an opportunity to win 3 or 4 of their last, 5 or 6 games and flirt with a bowl game.
Yeah.
Without knowing,
I mean, they still have the talent, but we'll see. We'll see. So, I got posed this question and guys wanted us to talk about this on the show this week. So I thought we talked about quarterback last week. I thought, okay, it's a good thing. So let's talk about the running back. A lot of good running backs in the Big 12. A lot of good ones. And you could consider some of these guys some of the top running backs in the country, in my opinion. So, Alec, I'll start with you. And who do you think is the best running back? And I guess we'll do a top 3. Let's not just leave it to just one. But who's in your top 3 as far as the best running backs in the Big 12 conference?
Give me Taj Brooks at Texas Tech. Give me DJ Giddens at K-State. And wild card, Cam Scadaboo, Arizona State.
I like it. I think
Cam Scadaboo is one of the lesser known names
correct
across the country, and I think he's one of the most exciting players to watch in the entire country. He's someone who will do like they call it the wild scat. They'll put him in wildcat formations. He's a really tough physical runner, but he's got some good speed to him. He's got 6 touchdowns on the year. He can line up in the slot. I think he's just a really diverse playmaking back. Has rushed for 615 yards, which is second in the Big 12 this year behind Brooks. Maybe I just took the top 3 guys. I don't know in terms of statistical success this year, but I really do like Cam Scadaboo. I wrote in the column over the weekend that he's probably one of the lesser known names. And that's why, I said it here again. I think that he is someone who people just don't really know about on this ASU team. And I think he's one of the true playmakers in the conference. Right. I think he's one conference offensive player of the week twice in the Big 12.
Gotcha. What about you, Cody?
Yeah, definitely Taj Brooks, number 1. I'd go DJ Giddens, number 2, and then RJ Harvey, number 3. I think Taj Brooks, if Ashton Jeanty wasn't doing what he's doing at Boise State, and I would say Taj Brooks would probably be like number 2 as far as the Doak Walker Award.
Caleb Johnson at Iowa.
Yeah. Taj Brooks, he's been there like forever. It was like 2019 or 2020 was his freshman year.
Yeah.
But I just think his consistency and what he's been able to do, since he's been there, he's got at least 95 yards in 16 straight games going back to last year. He's averaging 125 yards per game during that stretch. I think he's also in the top 10 as far as like broken tackles. So I think he's just more of like an all-around back. I would say him number 1 for sure, and Giddens, and then Harvey 2 or 3.
Gotcha. See, I'm going a different way. I like Taj Brooks, obviously number 1, but I like C.J. Donaldson. I think C.J. Donaldson is really good. The difference is he splits a lot of carries, so with Jaheim White. And I think DJ Giddens, I think if we're just talking professional running backs, I think DJ Giddens would be the top guy because he can do everything. He's not a burner. He's not a 4-3 guy, but he's fast enough. He's outstanding in the pass game, catching and blocking. He's elusive. But those are my 3 guys as far as the top running backs. But this conference, Cody, is just full of big-time running backs all over the place. In some schools, like I just mentioned, West Virginia, some people have 2. It's just crazy what the running back game is doing this year in this conference when, in years past, they've thrown it all over the lot. And not that they still don't, but just the running game has just been huge for the Big 12 in the Big 12 conference this year.
Well, yeah, and I think we knew it was going to be the best as far as the running back groups when comparing the rest of the power conferences. I think we knew that coming into the season, but I don't think you would, if somebody like if I told you that Ollie Gordon would be like nowhere in the top 10 as far as running backs in the
Correct.
conference, you'd be like, okay, where's the rest of the league at as far as that? Like,
Right.
but yeah, the fact that he's not had a good year and the rest of the conference has still been good, I think says a lot. But there's so many like underrated guys, like the guys you mentioned, CJ Donaldson, the back at Cincinnati, Corey
Kiner.
yeah, Corey Kiner, the back at Arizona, Kedrick Riscano. I probably butchered that name. Sorry. I think he's been pretty decent for them. Yeah, just some of the newcomers that have come in too from those new teams. Yeah, I've been pretty impressed. Micah Bernard at Utah. I don't think he gets enough talk. Yeah, just top to bottom. There's a lot of really good running backs in this conference.
Yeah, I would locally. Jalen Jackson, I think, is a name that a lot of people didn't know coming into the conference. Transferred from Eastern Michigan. They expected a Busse to be Iowa State's best back, but it's most clearly Jackson at this point through the first half of the season. He had 2 touchdowns and over 100 yards, and then went against Baylor on Saturday. And it kind of felt like those touchdowns were just kind of in the process of being made over the last few weeks. So he's someone I wouldn't be surprised in the second half of the season if you start to see him kind of climb these kind of conversations a little bit. I don't think he'll get in the Brooks, Giddens, Harvey, Scattaboo, Devin Neal type conversation. But I think he's a name that's maybe more well-known across the league.
Gotcha. Yeah, I noticed that too. I think he's really, really good. I watched that game on Saturday. I think he's really good. The one name, and you just mentioned it, Alec, is Devin Neal. I just feel like if Kansas could win more football games if they handed him the ball more. I just don't understand. Even on Saturday, they still could have given him the football, but he had 14 carries. I'm like, what are you doing? And I get it that Jalen Daniels didn't have a horrible game. He was still 58% throwing the football, which if you're going to convince me that that's good, you can talk the rest of your life. You're never going to convince me of that. So it wasn't that he turned the ball over, but your defense, again, you've mentioned it, Cody, complimentary football. Just run the ball when your defense can't stop them. And you're running the ball successfully. But yeah, Devin Neal's another guy in this conference that if Kansas was better, I think more people would be talking about him. Not that they don't already, but I also think if Kansas just gave him the ball more, maybe more people would be talking about him because he's really, really good. So I don't know. It's crazy. All right, guys, let's get to this upset of the week. A lot of games, or I shouldn't say that. Not a lot of games, what I meant to say. 5 games this week. I'll start with you, Cody. And again, I'm going to preface this in case anybody hasn't seen the show. Cody and Alec like to pick the same game each week. So I'm going to preface this that they cannot pick the same game this week. So I'll start with you, Cody, on the upset of the week. Who do you have?
I'm going to go with West Virginia over Iowa State. I guess that saves Alec then. He doesn't have to talk bad about Iowa State then and lose some followers and whatnot. But yeah, I'm going to go with West Virginia over Iowa State. Kind of like what we talked about earlier. Iowa State, they haven't really been tested yet this year. That's not to take away from anything that they've done. But I think just going on the road to West Virginia, to Morgantown, a tough place to travel to, a night game, just the way that West Virginia won last week on the road at Oklahoma State, I think they're starting to build some more momentum. I mean, their only 2 losses this year are to Penn State and Pitt, who are both still undefeated. So it's not like their 3-2 record is bad or anything with losses to bad teams. I think West Virginia, like we kind of talked about too, could be one of those teams that starts to sneak up into the conference standings. But yeah, I'm going to go with West Virginia over Iowa State as my pick.
Gotcha.
Certainly understand that. I'm going to go a different way, though, not only because I'm being forced to, but also because I don't agree. I actually think I have no clue who's going to win that game. I'm going to go Arizona winning on the road at BYU. I think BYU's 5-0 start raises a little bit more question than Iowa State's 5-0 start does. In Ames, if you talk to people who cover BYU, they raise concerns about their ability to run the ball, to stop the run. I think Arizona is a team that, they played really well in the second half last week against Texas Tech to overcome that 18-3 or 19-3 deficit at halftime. And then T-Mac just had a really uncharacteristic fumble on what could have been a game-winning drive for them in the fourth quarter. It's kind of been an on again, off again type pattern for Arizona. It's a game that's at 3:00 in Provo instead of a night game. I think that favors Arizona. I'll go Arizona plus 4.5 to win on the road at BYU.
Like it. A lot of people say the same thing, just not bought in fully on BYU yet. I'm going to go this way. I have a love-hate relationship with the fans at Cincinnati. So, Cincinnati, I am going to pick you to win this football game -3 at UCF. I have talked bad about Cincinnati. I said their stadium was little. They got on me. I said that it wasn't raucous, and they got on me. I picked them to be terrible, and they're not horrible. So I'm picking Cincinnati this week. Look, I think the wheels are falling off at UCF. They had huge opportunities the last 2 weeks, fell completely on their face. I think teams have just said, now that they're playing some decent competition, they've said, you're not going to run the ball. Make KJ Jefferson throw it and beat us. He can't do it. He wasn't able to do that at Arkansas either. And I think this is the what people are just starting to see. Oh, okay, well, maybe we needed to go a different way with the quarterback at UCF, because you can't just run on teams and just run it and never throw it. Not in this league. Yeah, I mean, I know that teams are running the football, but you got to be able to throw it at some point. Ask Oklahoma State that. And this is the problem that's going on at UCF. You see also at UCF, you've seen some defections, people leaving the program, maybe not necessarily starters, although there was one starter, guys that are leaving that are just jumping ship. And I'm like, okay, what's going on there? I just think it's a recipe for disaster. Give me Cincinnati. It's -4. I like Cincinnati on the road. Now for the lock of the week. Again, I'm going to preface this. You can't pick the same game, but I'm going to start with Alec this time, so get him off the hook.
I'm going to go Arizona State plus 6.5 against Utah in Tempe. Don't know about the status of Cam Rising. It's supposed to be hotter than hell in Tempe. I don't think that bodes well for Utah either. That's a good home cooking for Arizona State, pun intended. I will take Arizona State plus 6.5. I've been high on them all year. In the only game that they've lost this year, they just kind of shot themselves in the foot. So if they can avoid doing that against Utah at home, I think they can cover a touchdown.
Yeah, I was going to go with that one, but I'll go in a different direction now. I don't feel confident about the other three, so I'm going to have to go with UCF as my lock against Cincinnati. Mostly just because I don't feel confident about those other ones. Maybe I can talk myself into this one here. I just don't see how UCF loses 3 in a row. I think getting back home, I know they only had the short trip there to Gainesville last week, but getting back to the bounce house, maybe they can get something going on the ground. What's Cincinnati's run defense like? I can't even think of how decent they are. I mean, they're 4 points, almost 5 yards a carry they're giving up on the ground. So maybe there's some some success that they could find on the ground, get RJ Harvey going, get that ground game going, get KJ Jefferson on the run rather than having to throw the ball. I'll go with UCF over Cincinnati as my lock.
This game isn't being affected at all by the hurricane, is it?
I haven't heard.
I think they're planning on. Yeah, I think they're planning on it for now.
Okay.
Just depending on how.
I mean, Orlando
gets hit. I get.
It's in the middle.
It's on the other side. Yeah.
It's the middle eastern side, and the hurricane.
So I think it kind of depends on how. They're saying that the intensity is going to lighten up by the time it hits the coast, so it may only be a Category 3, but hell, who knows? I mean, these things are crazy these days. For me, I'm gonna go. I'm just gonna piggyback. I like Arizona. I do. I like Arizona on the road. I like that game. I think they're gonna have some offensive talent. I know BYU's defense is good. So I don't want to discredit what they've been able to do defensively this year, but I just believe that Arizona, again, they shot themselves in the foot last week. They should have been able to win 3 turnovers. They should have won the game. Not going to take any credit away from Texas Tech, but Arizona, they were right there, and they just gave the football game away. I don't think they do that on the road, and I think they end up winning at BYU. couple of games to talk about. Like I said, Utah at Arizona State, I think, is a big game. The game that nobody picked, and I'm just not comfortable with it. I'm a homer. I get it. But I'm not comfortable with Kansas State at Colorado. I think Kansas State can win the game, but I'm not comfortable. I wouldn't be comfortable if I was trying to bet that -4 for Kansas State or -4.5. I'm not doing that. I think it's going to be down to the wire. I think it's going to be high scoring. I really do. But I don't know if Kansas State can go there and win. They got to show me, Cody, that they can win on the road before I feel comfortable with that.
Oh yeah, that was the big thing that was concerning when they lost at BYU was just how rattled Avery Johnson looked.
Yeah.
Maybe that experience of going in there and having some mistakes and not having a great game. Maybe he learned from that going into Boulder now, night game. I think was that 10:15 Eastern kickoff or something like that. So yeah, a late kickoff, but maybe he learned from his mistakes and goes in there with a little bit more confidence. I'm like you though. I really don't know who to pick in this one. I think Colorado's starting to figure themselves out and get some momentum. As long as Travis Hunter can make some plays on offense and defense, he's going to keep Colorado in it. I could see him getting at least one pick on Avery Johnson, depending on how confident he is to throw that direction. This is as much of a toss-up in my opinion as there is this week.
I don't think Kansas State's receivers are very good. In fact, I know they're not very good. I think the only one that's really concerning is Brown, and he's probably going to draw the Hunter matchup for most of the night. I just don't think he's going to be able to get open. So that's going to force K-State to have to run the ball really effectively, which is something they should be able to do. But I don't think the rushing offense can be as good as UCF's is, and Colorado shut them down on the ground. They shut UCF down on the ground. I think this is maybe the most fascinating matchup in the conference this weekend. And if you're ballsy enough to put money on it, tip of the cap to you, because I can never do that.
Yeah, the thing for me is Kansas State is going to have to throw the football because Colorado's shown that they've been good against the run. So you're going to have to throw the football, and then, okay, you take your chances. What I do believe, because Colorado runs a ton of man coverage, you get DJ Giddens and Dylan Edwards on the field at the same time, and you start running some arrow routes, you start running some wheel routes, and make those linebackers cover him, either one of them, Kansas State's got something there. And if you run the ball with Avery Johnson, you'll be able to have something too, because Avery Johnson's a better passer than KJ Jefferson. Now, it's not by a ton, but I think he's a little bit better, which I think gives them an advantage to win the game.
I think a big X factor for this is how well K-State's able to rush the passer. We know they had to replace a couple pass rushers in the offseason. Nate Matlack enters the portal. I believe he transferred to Pitt. Khalid Duke loses his eligibility. They've had some guys like Brendan Mott emerge on the defensive line, but are they able to really pressure Shedeur Sanders? Because if you're not going to be able to do that, I think that they're going to be able to throw the ball all over the field on K-State, because I think they can do that against. I think they can do that against most secondaries. That's nothing against K-State secondary that has some good players with guys like VJ Payne and Marquise Siegel. But LeJontay Wester, Travis Hunter, Harvey, all those guys are playmakers.
Yeah, that was the strength I was going to mention for K-State that they have to take advantage of is that pass rush against Colorado's offensive line that has. I mean, I know they throw the ball a ton, so Shedeur's back there a lot to get sacked, but they've given up a lot of sacks, and if K-State can get after him, I think that's the strength that they have to lean on to win this one on the road
and get after him without blitzing. Just bringing four, because in the games that Colorado struggled, look, Nebraska basically beat Colorado by saying you can't run it because you can't block our front four and you can't block us passing the ball. They literally rushed for the whole game and Colorado couldn't stop them. Baylor did the same thing too. Baylor didn't send a bunch of blitzes. Baylor just rushed four guys and they were able to get back there pretty much at will. Kansas State runs a three-man line. They're going to have to change it up because I don't think three is enough. They're going to have to at least bring four. So you guys are right. The last game that we'll talk about is Iowa State at West Virginia. I think it's going to be an outstanding game. I've mentioned earlier about legitimacy. I think if West Virginia wins the game, because I know they're kicking themselves about that Pitt game. They absolutely are. But if they can win this football game, it brings them some legitimacy to the table, because the teams that they have beaten, not so much. I think the same thing with Iowa State. If Iowa State beats West Virginia, bring some legitimacy to the table, even though I get the Iowa win, but I'm just not sure how much people respect that Iowa win at this point in the season. I don't know. Either way, I just think it's a game that can bring legitimacy to both teams in this conference. And I think it's going to be a hell of a football game.
Yeah, I think this is probably going to be the game of the weekend in the Big 12, this or the K-State Colorado game. I look at this game and I have no clue who's going to win, which is great to say when you're one of the people who's covering one of the two teams. Iowa State's a 3-point favorite. I really do believe in the progression that their rushing offense has made in the last couple of weeks with the emergence of Jalen Jackson. They've got a starting healthy left tackle now, and Jalen Travis. Their offensive line in general just has a boost of depth that it didn't have in the first couple of weeks of the season. And I know that Iowa State's defense is going to be really good. It always is. But I do have concerns about how well they're going to be able to stop the WVU rushing offense, because they just have so many injuries at linebacker. Potentially going to be without freshman Kilberzina. That would add to a list that already includes Caleb Bacon, Carson Willich, Will McLaughlin. That's concerning to me against a team that runs the ball this well. But if it turns into a high-scoring game, I think I kind of lean Iowa State because they have the playmakers at receiver. I think they have the quarterback advantage. I picked Iowa State in the column earlier this week for our West Virginia site. I think I picked them 27-24. I'll roll with it. I'll take the Cyclones.
Yeah, I'm going West Virginia like I picked earlier. I think it's a tough road trip into Morgantown for Iowa State. It's like we've mentioned, it's their first, real test of this season. Kind of an interesting stat for West Virginia. I don't know if I've mentioned this on this podcast before, but since Neil Brown took over in 2019, they're 17-1 when rushing for at least 200 yards in a game. So I know, that's obviously a pretty good win percentage there, but Iowa State really doesn't give up a whole lot of yards in the ground, but that one game that they did was the Iowa one where they gave up 204. If West Virginia is able to get that ground game going and establish the run and is able to even just get close to that 200-yard mark, I think that's probably a pretty good sign of success and a win for West Virginia.
Right. I like West Virginia. I think it's going to be a great football game. I think it's going to be a close football game. I agree with you, Cody, that get the run game going. But it's going to be a hostile crowd. Now, I don't know how much it's going to be more hostile. Well, actually, I think it is more than Iowa. I get Iowa. It's a great home crowd, but they're going to be all lathered up at West Virginia, spending all day drinking for that night game. I just think they're going to have just a more of an advantage. That's all. Nothing strategically or anything like that. This is just Big B saying, I think they're going to have an advantage to win the football game, and I think they do. And sometimes it comes down to that. We can throw all the schematics and all that stuff and all the analytics and statistics out there that we want to, but sometimes it just comes down to who do you think is going to have the advantage? And I think West Virginia is just going to have the advantage to win the football game. But I do think it's going to be a heck of a football game. So, well, I appreciate you guys, man. Thank you guys for giving the time today to come on the show, and thank everybody again for showing up. Again, remember to like, follow, subscribe, all that good stuff. We appreciate you guys. Talk to you soon.
Thank you for watching the Big 12 Insiders, your Big 12 sports show. This has been a Spirit Street production.